What happens when Hollywood's toughest fighter walks into the lion's den? Not a boxing ring this time, but the sharp tongues of daytime television. When Sylvester Stallone sat down on The View for what was supposed to be a friendly chat, nobody expected the gloves to come off. This is the story of how admiration turned into interrogation, and how Stallone, at 77, proved he could still go the distance. The studio buzzed that morning. Producers darted across the floor. The crowd hummed with anticipation. And then the cameras rolled. Stallone stepped out in a tailored gray suit, shoulders squared, half smile in place. The applause was warm, but under it he felt something colder. Instinct told him this wasn't going to be just another light-hearted interview. "Ladies and gentlemen," Joy Behar began, her voice sugar-coated yet sharp. "The man who's been punching his way into our hearts since the 70s, Sylvester Stallone. Thanks for having me." Stallone replied, his gravelly voice filling the room with steady confidence. He shook hands, nodded politely, but already caught the glint in Joy's eyes, the kind that meant this wouldn't be about his latest film. "So, Sly?" She smirked. "Do you mind if I call you Sly? You've been making these big, loud, testosterone-driven movies for nearly 50 years. Don't you ever wonder if maybe the world's moved on from all that macho stuff?" The audience chuckled uneasily. Stallone smiled too, though his gaze sharpened. "Joy," he said evenly. "The world might move fast, but there's always room for stories about resilience. Rocky didn't win because he threw punches. He won because he kept getting back up. That's not violence. That's spirit." But the hosts weren't finished. "Isn't it a little dated?" Sonny Hostin asked. "The muscle-bound hero thing? Maybe today's audience wants something more sophisticated." Stallone's jaw tightened, though his voice remained calm. "There's nothing more sophisticated than the human will to overcome." Joy leaned in again. "But aren't you just playing the same guy over and over? Rocky, Rambo, Barney Ross. Different costumes, same fists." The jab landed. Stallone leaned forward, hands on his knees. "I've told stories about underdogs, soldiers, fathers, men at the edge of their limits. If they share grit, it's because grit is universal." The audience applauded, but Joy waved it off. "Oh, please, Sly, don't make it sound like Shakespeare. At the end of the day, you're just throwing punches and blowing things up. You're a good-looking guy who lucked into one big movie and just kept coasting." The studio went silent. Even the other hosts exchanged uneasy glances. The remark landed like a sucker punch, but Stallone didn't flinch. His reply was calm, too calm. "You're entitled to your opinion, Joy," he said evenly, eyes locked on hers. "But I worked for every inch of my career. Nobody handed me anything. I wrote Rocky when I had nothing. It changed my life because I refused to quit." Joy smirked. Yeah, we've all heard the bus station story. But come on, it's been decades. Maybe it's time to hang up the gloves and admit these movies are just cashing in on nostalgia." Stallone leaned back, folding his arms. He didn't rise to the bait, but the storm gathering behind his eyes was impossible to miss. By the time the commercial break ended, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. He sat poised, jawline rigid, gaze never leaving Joy. She sensed it, blood in the water, and went in for the kill. "So, Sly," she said, feigning casual curiosity, "do you even consider yourself an actor? Or are you just playing yourself over and over?" Stallone raised an eyebrow, the faintest smile tugging his lips. "Well, Joy, I've been nominated for Oscars. I've written, directed, produced, and starred. That usually counts as acting in most circles." "Oh, please." She rolled her eyes. "That nomination was in 1976. You were young and hungry. Now you're just milking the same old characters. Rocky, Rambo, whatever muscle-bound guy comes next. Safe, predictable. Don't you ever challenge yourself?" The crowd murmured. Stallone leaned forward, voice low but cutting. "Every film I make is a challenge. Physically, emotionally. You don't know what it takes to carry a story, to give everything you've got to move people. But go ahead, Joy. Tell me my job. You seem to know it better than I do." Whoopi tried to step in. "Maybe we can talk about the new movie, Sly." But Joy waved her off. "No, Whoopi. Let's not let him off the hook." She leaned closer, her tone icy. "What's it like knowing the only reason people still buy tickets is because they feel sorry for you? That they're clinging to nostalgia because the real Sylvester Stallone, the fighter, the icon, died 50 years ago? What's it like knowing your best work is ancient history?" The gasp from the audience was audible. Stallone sat frozen, hands tightening on his knees. Then slowly, he let out a short, humorless laugh. "You know what, Joy?" he said finally, his voice low, dangerous. "You've got guts. I'll give you that. But you've got no idea what you're talking about. You think sitting here with a camera and an audience gives you the right to tear down people who've actually built something. People who've fought, bled, and worked their whole lives to create something meaningful. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me." Joy sneered. "Oh, sure, Sly. Poor little underdog. Still fighting the good fight, huh? Still trying to prove you're more than a pair of biceps." Joy sneered. "But nobody buys it anymore. The world's moved on. You're a relic." At that word, Stallone shifted. He straightened in his chair, shoulders squared, and when he spoke, his voice carried steel. "A relic?" He repeated. "You think because the world changes, everything that came before means nothing? You think new stories erase the old ones? The stories I told still inspire people. They still matter. And I still matter, whether you like it or not." Sonny Hostin tried to soften the moment. "I think what Joy's saying, and I could be wrong, is maybe it's time for new voices to step forward. For legends like yourself to step aside." Stallone turned to her, and she visibly shrank under his gaze. "I don't take up space that isn't mine," he said firmly. "There's room for everyone, if they're willing to fight for it. I fought for mine. Nobody handed me a damn thing, and I won't apologize for still being here." Joy laughed, sharp and mocking. "Oh, we know you fought. You've told that sob story so many times it's practically a lullaby. But here's the truth. You're terrified. Terrified of fading away. That's why you keep churning out the same junk. It's sad, really," the audience murmured. Gasps, nervous shifting. Even producers behind the cameras exchanged uneasy looks. But Stallone didn't blink. He leaned forward, folding his massive hands together, his voice dropping to a growl that somehow filled the studio. "You want to talk about sad, Joy? Sad is sitting here every day tearing down people who are actually out there doing something. Living, creating. You call it journalism, accountability. It's not. It's bitterness. It's jealousy dressed up as insight. You've built a career mocking others. Congratulations." Joy's face flushed, but she forced a cold, tight smile. "Oh, look at the tough guy getting sensitive. Did I strike a nerve, Sly? Does the truth hurt?" Stallone didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on hers, dark and steady. "Truth," he said quietly. "You wouldn't recognize the truth if it sat in this chair and shook your hand." The audience erupted. Applause, laughter, gasps. The air crackled. A storm was brewing, and everyone could feel it. When the cameras came back from break, the silence in the studio was suffocating. Even the normally rowdy audience sat frozen, eyes fixed on the standoff. Joy shuffled her papers, a nervous tic disguised as composure, and leaned in with a predator's smile. "So, Sylvester," she purred, voice dripping mock sweetness. "Before the break you accused me of, what was it? Bitterness? Jealousy? Maybe it's easier to believe that than face the fact that your movies really are as shallow as people say." Stallone's lips twitched, but he stayed seated, his massive frame locked in controlled tension. "My movies," he said slowly, each word deliberate, "are about giving people hope, something to hold on to when life is beating them down. If you can't see that, Joy, that's not my problem. That's yours." Joy smirked, leaning in. Her voice turned sharp, designed to cut. "Hope, please. Your movies are sweaty men pounding each other into the ground, while a flag waves in the background. 50 years of teaching boys that a clenched fist solves everything. And you call that hope? The words lingered in the air like smoke. Even Whoopi sat silent, lips pressed tight. Stallone exhaled through his nose, veins standing out on his forearms as his hands clenched together. You know what, Joy? He growled. When you've stood in my shoes, when you've faced rejection after rejection, when you've written a script by hand because nobody believed in you, when you've had to sell your dog to eat and still fought your way back, then you can sit there and judge me. Until then, you're just another voice in the cheap seats. A ripple of applause broke from the audience, but Joy waved it down, pretending she still had control. Oh yes, she mocked. The famous I sold my dog story. It's practically part of your brand now. But one sad story from 50 years ago doesn't excuse a lifetime of glorifying violence and mediocrity. That one landed. The flash of hurt in Stallone's eyes quickly turned to fire. Mediocrity. His voice was low, dangerous. You think it's mediocrity to fight for every inch? To get back up when everyone tells you to stay down? To create something that inspires millions who've been told they're not good enough? That's not mediocrity, Joy. That's making a difference. But Joy wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her smile gone. And yet, she hissed, what do you really have to show for it? Meathead fans who think they're Rocky? Sequels nobody asked for? A legacy of broken noses and bruised egos? The other co-hosts shifted in their seats. Even the producers looked uneasy. But Joy pressed harder, her voice rising. You know what I see when I look at you, Sylvester? I see a man who got lucky once and has been riding that punch ever since. You're not a fighter. You're a fraud. A mascot for outdated masculinity. A joke. That word hit like a hammer. Joke. For the first time since he sat down, Stallone's composure cracked. He leaned forward, eyes blazing, voice quiet, but carrying across the entire studio. You want to call me a joke? He said. Fine, call me whatever makes you feel better. But let me tell you something, Joy. The only joke here is the idea that you think you're a journalist. You're not. You're a heckler with a camera, the audience gasped. Joy flushed crimson, but Stallone pressed on, his voice rising with conviction. You sit here every day tearing down people who've actually done something, who've built something. You mock, belittle, humiliate, and then hide behind words like journalism and accountability. But you're not holding anyone accountable. You're feeding off other people's pain. His chest heaved, breath heavy, fire burning in his eyes. You think you know me? You think you understand my life? You don't know the first damn thing about what it takes to keep getting back up after life knocks you down. All you know how to do, Stallone said, his words rumbling low and hard, is sit safe behind this little desk and throw stones at people who've actually lived. Joy tried to jump in, but her mouth stalled under the weight of his voice. I've spent my life building people up. Stallone pressed on, louder now, the sound rolling through the studio like thunder, giving them something to believe in, and all you've done is tear people down. You want to talk legacy? He leaned forward, his glare burning. That's yours. That's who you are, a destroyer. For a heartbeat, silence gripped the room. Even the cameras seemed uncertain where to land. Stallone's blazing stare, or Joy's stunned face. Joy finally found her voice, shaky but sharp. If you can't handle tough questions, Sylvester, maybe you should stay off TV. Maybe you should just fade away quietly and stop embarrassing yourself. Stallone let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head slowly. No, Joy, you don't get to tell me when I'm done. You don't get to decide when I stop fighting. And you sure as hell don't get to sit there pretending you're better than me. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You're not better than me, Joy. You're just louder. And loud doesn't make you right. The words cut through the air like glass. The studio froze. Crew members stood rigid, unsure if they should roll on or cut to commercial. Joy leaned back, that smug little smile twitching at the corner of her lips. "Well," she purred, tone dripping with mock pity. "Looks like Rocky can take a few punches in the ring. But he sure can't handle a few tough questions on TV." The audience murmured. Gasps, head shakes, uneasy laughter. Stallone didn't flinch. With deliberate calm, he unclipped his mic and set it on the table. His voice was steady, but there was a storm under every word. "I came here today thinking this was about my work, my career, my journey. I thought maybe we'd talk about what 50 years in this business means. What it takes to survive in a world that eats you alive." Joy rolled her eyes, cutting in. "Oh, spare us the martyr act. You're not some poor underdog anymore, Sylvester. You're a rich man clinging to a fairy tale that stopped inspiring anyone decades ago. That did it." Stallone rose slowly from his chair, the leather groaning under his weight. The room held its breath. He squared his shoulders, adjusted his jacket, and fixed Joy with a stare that could split concrete. "You don't know a damn thing about inspiring anyone," he said, his voice rising just enough to command the entire room. "You don't know struggle. You don't know sacrifice. You don't know what it means to get up when life beats you down." He pointed a finger, sharp as a jab. "All you know is how to sit on your little throne of cynicism and rip other people apart, because you don't have the guts to create anything yourself." Joy tried to speak, but he cut her down with a snap of his hand. "No, you've had your turn." His voice now roared, decades of fire breaking loose. "You've mocked my work, my fans, me, and you call that journalism? You think that makes you better than me? Smarter, right?" Stallone stepped closer to the table. His presence loomed, magnetic, pulling every eye in the room toward him. The studio lights seemed to dim, the air dropping to ice. "You want to know what you really are, Joy?" His voice was a whisper of steel that somehow carried to every corner of the set. Joy swallowed hard, her smirk faltering. "You're not a journalist. You're not a critic. You're not even a host. You're a vulture. You feed on people's pain. You tear down what's good, what's noble, just to feel bigger than you are. But the truth is, you're small." The audience was stone silent. Even the co-hosts sat paralyzed, hands frozen in their laps. Stallone's words cut deeper. "You think I came here for you? You think I give a damn about what you think of me? I'm here for the audience, for the people at home who watched my movies and told me they kept going, they kept fighting, because of the stories I told. That's who I work for. Not you." Joy's face flushed with anger, but her hands trembled on the table. "You sit here pretending you're the voice of the people." Stallone pressed on, his fury rising. "But you don't listen to anyone. All you care about is being louder than everyone else. But your words?" He leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "They're empty. They mean nothing." He reached down, lifted his microphone, then dropped it back onto the desk with a sharp clack that echoed through the frozen studio. "This interview," he said, his voice final, "is over." Stallone straightened his jacket, turned and began walking toward the studio doors. His footsteps thundered across the floor, but just before he reached them, he stopped. Slowly he turned back, his gaze locking on Joy. "You call this journalism? You call this truth?" His words rang like a verdict. "This is a circus, a cheap circus, and the clowns don't even realize the joke is on them." Joy's smugness cracked, her face paling. "You've spent your life tearing down people like me because it distracts you from what you see in the mirror. And you know what you see?" He paused, his eyes narrowing to a blade. "Nothing." With that, he turned again, his broad shoulders cutting through the silence. His footsteps echoed louder than applause as he walked out of the studio without another word. No one moved. No one spoke. The cameras kept rolling, capturing Joy Behar frozen in her chair, her co-hosts staring down at their laps, and an audience split between shock, awe, and scattered applause. Somewhere beyond the lights, beyond the cameras, Stallone disappeared into the hallway, leaving behind silence, bruised egos, and the unmistakable feeling that they had just witnessed something monumental.